Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lala. Thank you everyone for subscribing recently, for tuning in, liking, commenting. All of you guys, thank you so much because my page has been growing so fast. But today I'm going to be doing something a little different. I'm going to be reacting to TikToks and the stitches that people do to the TikTok. So I hope you guys like this content. If you do, make sure you hit that notification bell, like, share, comment, whatever you feel like doing. So let's get into the video. So I have not watched these videos yet. I want to watch them with you guys so you get a natural reaction. This first video is about this lady saying that Africa is not poor because of colonization. I haven't heard a thing she said about it yet, so let's watch it together.
Today, Singapore is richer than its ex-colonizer, Great Britain. So when I hear people telling me today, oh, Africa is poor because of colonization, I'm like, please, let's move on from that. Does it have maybe a tiny percentage in where we are today? Maybe, and I don't know. But I know it's not the cause. Because if it were, many countless countries have been colonized before, and by the way, colonizing one another is humanity's history. It just happened that maybe Africa has been one of the last, colonized region in the world. So in our psyche, it is there, and it acts like nothing happened before to others. But flash news, it's the history of the world. We've been capturing each other back and forth, all of that. So anyway, but the truth is, Singapore richer than Great Britain today. And then Hong Kong happened. And then because Hong Kong happened, China even today happened. Because China's like, wait a minute, what went on over there? And then China went on to do the exact same thing with its SEZs, the special economic zones, some of the most free market zones in the world. And then look at it happen in communist China, who, when it comes to economics, decided that we're going to do the free market, we're going to be capitalist, because that's the only way. We tried everything else. We killed hundreds of millions of people, and we have nothing to show for it. But now that we're tired of being disrespected members of society, because guess what? That's the other thing too. You want to be respected in this world? Then I have to be among the prosperous ones for other reasons. Would it be nice, G, that we respect people just because? Absolutely. But that's really not the world we live in. So when China got tired of being disrespected, they're like, maybe we got to build also some prosperity here, because then they're going to hear us. And today, China, being one of the, being where it is at, even Hollywood, who tries to tell the world how to think, is being told by China what movies to make and how to tweak stories and history in order to be palatable for them. You see the power that comes with being prosperous.
Okay, I'm gonna save my response, y'all. Let's get into these responses and let's see what people have to say.
Africa is poor because of colonization. I'm like, please, let's move on from that.
So the level of ignorance this lady displayed in this particular video is too much. And I'm happy that most people told her that she's ignorant. In fact, this lady is ignorant. She doesn't understand how the world works. She's basically ignorant. His basis for his argument is weak. She's trying to compare an entire continent to one country, China, and Singapore. You are trying to, your comparison doesn't even make sense. Now you are saying that Great Britain colonized Singapore, and today Singapore is rich. The British, they left Singapore, or neo-colonial project is not alive in Singapore today because Singapore have no better resource, right? And the Western America didn't build their economies at the expense of Singapore's economy. The Western America target Africa. They build their economies at the expense of we Africans' economies. So neo-colonial project is still alive in Africa. When we talk about colonization, some people, they think colonization has ended. No, slavery has ended, but neo-colonial project is alive. So it's not a thing of the past. It's still happening. You see, you're trying to compare us to China. What is the population of China? almost 1.5 billion people, right? And China is one country. Africa is still fighting to even unite. And the West keep on killing our leaders. All the leaders who try to unite Africa, they kill us. Africa is divided. We call it divide and conquer. So they deliberately divided Africa into pieces in order to exploit Africa. Some African countries are not even allowed to even spend their own currency. They have to still spend the colonial master currency. And some have tried their possible best to get out of this situation, but the Western America still, they kill their leaders, right? You cannot blame everything entirely on us. We are also trying our best on the continent. Looking at this lady, I can see that she grew up in the West and basically, she's saying what she has been told to say because she have no idea what is actually happening on the continent. She's ignorant. She doesn't know anything about African politics, history. He got it wrong. Everything, this woman got it wrong. She have no idea what is happening on the continent. Now, both China and Singapore, they are all in Asia. Are you trying to tell me that all Asian countries are wealthy? Are you trying to tell me that all the countries in Asia are rich? There are some countries in Asia who are extremely poor, poor even more than Africa, right? So you don't compare a single country to an entire continent, then you blame us.
He was spot on with his. I'm gonna have to respond to that one. Like, he's telling the truth. Like, every African president that I've known that spoke up to the truth, like, or tried to speak up or stand up against corruption, they've been, murdered, assassinated. Look at the president of Haiti, the president in Tanzania. When all this pandemic was going on, like, what happened to them when they stood up to what's right? Like, it's still going on now. So for you to compare these other countries that are not even close to a comparison is just ridiculous. And I knew she was ignorant when she kept saying maybe what? You can't make such a strong statement and use the words maybe more than once in your statement, or even at all. You gotta be completely sure what you're talking about before you make such a strong statement, because these things are still in place to hold the continent down to this day. There's still neo-colonization going on in Africa right now. So let's get into the other replies.
Africa is poor because of colonization. I'm like, please, let's move on from that.
Any infrastructure Europeans built in Africa was to transport goods, resources from the interior of Africa to the coast to be taken to Europe. Any roads, railway, anything at all, if it didn't serve Europeans to extract Africa's wealth, Africa's resources to the coast, to Europe, it was not built, not one. So yeah, we are going to talk about colonization when we look at the current state of Africa. As for Ethiopia, because I know what you're gonna say, think of coffee, where coffee comes from and how much money Ethiopia makes. Close to nothing. And how much money the people you think are so prosperous because they're so smart make off of it. I also like to talk about information. This is a good place to talk about information and how much information is repressed when it comes to African history. For example, myself, who's been reading history since I was a kid, I learned about Stalin's gulags and Hitler's concentration camps, including those in North Africa, before I learned about internment camps, detention camps, work camps, where people were tortured, died in sub-Saharan Africa. For example, the Congo, Railway, the one from Brazzaville to Pointe Noire, which I think they also connected to bring manganese from Gabon, Mbinda, to Congo to Pointe Noire. Anyways, when building that railway from Brazzaville to Pointe Noire, in 10 years or a little over 10 years, more people died than building the pyramids of Giza in 80 years. And the shit that those workers went through building that shit, I mean, part of it was, Mayombe, like the forest was just, to build anything at all was close to impossible, and they made the Africans do it. The volunteers that they recruited, they forced them. And they lived in those work camps in horrible conditions. Or the detention camps during the Mau Mau rising in Kenya between 1952, 1960, 1959, where people were tortured in those camps.
I hear people telling me today, oh, Africa is poor because of colonization. I'm like, please, let's move on from that.
So this is a very interesting and popular argument, so let's talk about it for a little bit. What I would like to do right now, as opposed to advocating for one side or the other, is provide both sides of this argument. Because this topic is fairly nuanced and fairly complicated, both sides usually misrepresent each other fairly often. So what I would like to do is talk about some of the literature and the theories behind this argument. A perfect representation of what this argument really is can be found in the title of two books. This one, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney, and this one, How Africa Underdevelops Africa by Stanley Igwe. The names of these two books obviously gives a pretty solid overview of what this argument really is. In How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, Walter Rodney unapologetically argues that as Africa was developing Europe, Europe was systematically underdeveloping the continent. Europe deliberately and drastically exploited Africa, and the effects of this exploitation can still be seen politically and economically on the continent today. The idea here was that any idea that capitalism brought by Europeans somehow helped Africa financially is a myth, it's a mirage. In reality, Africans need to understand what capitalism is and the damage and destruction, the carnage it's brought on our continent. This is Rodney's argument. Igwe, on the other hand, admittedly claims that his book is not necessarily meant to replace Walter Rodney's, mostly because that would be pretty difficult to do. Rodney's is a classic. And Igwe acknowledges that Rodney's book still has a place in the discourse here. However, he feels like a part of the argument that's important as well is the roles that African leaders played in the underdevelopment of our countries. Igwe argues that the origin of poverty and underdevelopment in Africa can be traced to Marxism and what could be called the blame colonialism game. Igwe articulates an argument somewhat similar to another passionate voice in this debate, the Ghanaian economist George Ayete. Ayete argues in several books that African problems require African solutions. And he claims that a lot of African leaders are always running to the West, either for ideas or for handouts. And their constant desire to play the victim card while berating the West, while at the same time constantly asking the West for money, is what's leading to Africa's economic collapse. In this particular book, Africa Betrayed, Ayete basically goes off on a lot of African leaders and points out all of their shortcomings and all of the ways that they have destroyed the continent. But on the other side of this argument, we have to consider the concept of neocolonialism, according to Kwame Nkrumah, the first president of Ghana. And we will continue with neocolonialism in part 2.
I'm like,
Well, yes it is. Because different regions of the British Empire got different functionalities for this empire. For example, some regions are designed for them to migrate to, like Canada, Australia and New Zealand. These regions will form into a market that majority of its societies are white people, and so they can do business, and also they can migrate to. And some regions like Hong Kong and Singapore, their functionality is to be a port for them, so they can transfer their goods, and also these cities can sooner form into a business market for them as well, and these cities can be rich. And some places they have much resource, and those places are for the British Empire to exploit. For example, Africa and India. That's why these countries are poor, because the British Empire don't have the desire or any any will to build these countries, to develop these countries, because they don't care. They just want to exploit these countries. And that's why these countries still can't recover from the exploitations until today, because their functionalities are not for developing a good market for British Empire. They're just simply a exploitation farm for the British Empire. And people always use Singapore and Hong Kong compare with these regions that got exploited and saying that colonization is not bad. And I will say they don't know a bit about history at all.
Okay, y'all. So my opinion on this, like, she's just completely ignorant. Clearly, she doesn't know history. I could tell she was ignorant, and her stance was ignorant from the moment she said the first maybe, because you're grasping at straws trying to make such a strong statement and sound smart, and you're really just ignorant as hell. And the fact that Africa is still neo-colonized, like, to this moment, and you're not aware of this, it just shows me like you have a complete disconnect and you're completely ignorant. But let's move on to the next video. So in the next video, I haven't completely watched it yet, but it's basically Africans having a discussion with African Americans. So let's start it.
Even though I want to disagree with you, I get where you're coming from. When I see black people talking about racism, all that stuff, I'm like, what is wrong with these people? You guys have food, you have EBT, all this thing, and you're here shouting about somebody is racist too. Just leave that person and move on. I feel that way. Like, why are they always like complaining? But when Black Lives Matters started happening, like, I sat down, I said, I need to actually know why these people are pained. And if we look at the history, what they've done to them, like if you actually sit down, watch some documentaries, how they were maltreated, I don't think if I'm actually born, I will forgive those people. I don't care. It's easier for us Africans that were raised in Africa to feel like they're complaining because we were raised through struggle. Like, I barely even have water, and you have water, you're complaining. But then it's not about the basic necessity or about how we are raised. We are raised like, I don't want to say way better. We might not have resources, but there are some way, like our own people will not look down on us or put us behind. So it's in their nature that way. Like, they just can't overlook it. And if you sit down and watch everything that the forefathers have been through for you, I changed my mind. No, they need to be angry. However, they should still move forward.
Let's look at the responses before I even say anything.
Even though I want to disagree with you, I get where you're coming from. When I see black people talking.
On top of that, I appreciate you too for looking into our history and everything. But did you even, I could get a little deep, but I ain't got that much time. We need to do the same thing about y'all history, but since we're not over there, so we're not going to do too much studying about y'all history, just to be honest, because we're not over it. But as soon as y'all get over here, y'all start seeing the things and that's going over in America, and you can see why we complain. I mean, you don't understand why we complain so much. But just, we've been over here for 400 years, and Africans can come over here day one and have an advantage over us. Day one, 24 hours. You could get grants. You don't have to pay taxes for, I think 5 years. Just like any other ethnicity. We've been here for 400 years. We can't get the grants that we're denied on a wide scale of business loans, any kind of loans. Us Americans, that we built this country off our ancestors, we can't get loans like anybody else. You all can get loans, grants, and everything as soon as y'all get here. It's a fact. We was forbidden to read and learn up to 150 years ago. Yeah, we hung from trees because we try to educate ourselves. Yeah. They ate us. Yo, them color people, they ate us. Consumed. Picnic. When we did thrive, Tulsa, Oklahoma, you doing your research, they bombed us. U.S. planes, United States airplanes bombed black people's neighborhoods on U.S. soil. That was 100 years ago. It wasn't nothing but 100 years ago. Facts. Yeah. Black people don't have no. Please, listen, I go to African spot at least once a week and eat food. I can show you downstairs, and I love the herbs and everything, man. The food is good, fufu, everything. I'm into that, and I constantly learn what y'all like and dislike about America. But this is the plantation. Yeah, that's why y'all like to go back to Africa to visit, because y'all don't do number work here. It's designed like that.
Even though I want to disagree with you, I get where you're coming from. When I see black people talking.
Okay, so I watched this video that I'm stitching, and honestly speaking, I think this lady is ignorant, like really ignorant. And the reason why I say that is because at a point she basically says that if someone is racist towards you, just leave them and move on. Like, it's that easy. When there's like systematic racism that everybody talks about every day. And then she ends it with, oh, I understand why they're angry, but like they just need to move forward. And honestly, I felt like people need to start doing their research and reading up on Black American history. If Black Americans did not fight the fight that they fought and still fight till today, people from Africa that come to America will not have rights. I think we need to fucking understand that. You people need to start doing your research and stop chatting shit, please.
Where you're coming from. When I see black people talking about racism, all that stuff.
This is a really good conversation. And I think what she's saying really is a product of media and marketing. And what I mean by that is when I was a child growing up, most of the images that I was given about Africans in Africa was that of hunger and emaciated children not having enough food and shelter. Or the old Tarzan movies. Like it was the feeding of what it meant to be African. Okay. On the reverse side, I am pretty sure that Africans living in Africa or Africans that lived in European countries, or even Caribbeans who are also of African descent, saw America as this land of the free, land of the brave, land of the home, land of capitalism. You can go there with nothing and make something of yourself. But it also showed African Americans in a negative light as lazy, all the stereotypes, lazy, thugs, killing each other, so on and so forth. So while we Americans, and mostly African Americans, had this way that we thought Africans basically stereotyped African Americans as the things that this lady is describing in the video, and did not see or understand the systemic oppression that still exists to this day. And even more so because Africans chose to assimilate into American culture, American values, which are also closer to white Christian conservative values. They aligned themselves with non-African American ideals. And what I mean by that is they pushed themselves as far away as they could from African Americans because it benefited them to not be in alignment with African Americans, because we were looked down. We were looked down upon Americans as a whole, if that makes sense, So it was a benefit to Africans or any POC, non-POC, to say, no, we are not like them. And now that Africans are clearly seeing that, no, there is a systemic, if you don't open your mouth as an African, you're just black. You're just black. Before you talk, you're just black. And when you're just black in America, you are susceptible to all the things that happen to just black
people. And it changes the conversation. And I hope we can continue to talk about it.
I like her response. Yeah, that is true. America has a system where it's a capitalist, society. When I was in Jamaica, I remember they used to. The only show we seen in America was Price is Right. So imagine you living in America and you are on making low income, which my parents made pretty okay income, but if you are there and you want to capitalize and you want to make something of yourself and you want this American dream, when you see Prices Right on the television, what is it going to seem like to you? It seems like money is being handed out for free. It seems like money just grows on trees there, like anybody can just go there and benefit. And honestly, it's not true. I mean, you can benefit, you can capitalize, but there is a systematic slave system that is there to hold black people back, no matter where you're from, whether you're from Africa, Caribbean, or America. Like, it's just, they're not working with you. They don't want to see you on top. So we have to work much harder. We have to be much more creative to really benefit in America. It doesn't matter where you're from. So this is where we can all unite to see, like, we're the same. We're the same, no matter how much they try to divide us and make one group feel more special than the other. We're the same in America. In America, they see you as black, period. And if you are dealing with a racist in that moment, you're going to get what a black person will receive in that moment, no matter where you're from. They don't care.